You are listening to Invisible Not Broken, a podcast where we talk about life with chronic illness and everything that goes with it. We interview inspirational leaders and compassionate practitioners. I'm Eva Minkoff, your co-host, fibromyalgia warrior, and founder of Wellacopia. Wellacopia is humanizing healthcare by matching chronic illness warriors with their ideal practitioners, the ones who will be the ringleaders in their care. Today, I'm super excited to reintroduce Dr. Bojana Weatherly, who was previously on Invisible Not Broken. If you want to check that one out, the episode is titled Hope, Being Present, and Baby Steps Towards Healing, and it was published in July of this past year, 2019. As a quick recap, Dr. Bojana is an award-winning physician, double board certified in internal and integrative medicine, who transitioned from standard care to her own integrative practice. Today, she's back on the show, taking a deeper dive into mindfulness and its profound ability to influence our lives with or without chronic illness. And in this episode, we talk about the definitions of mindfulness, including the 4 types of meditation practices and how to adapt to them to your mind and body needs, as well as how to build your own resilience routine and coping skills. So chock full of advice today, and the power of your mind to take charge of your body, breathing techniques, and more. Before we get started, a reminder that all conversations, observations, and health claims on this podcast are based on individual experiences and expertise. Everyone has their own personal and professional truths and should be treated as such. Also, please support Invisible Not Broken with Patreon. We are a self-funded podcast, and we could really use your help to keep Invisible Not Broken going and hopefully expanding. Even $5 a month means so much to us. To show us some love, visit www.patreon.com/invisiblenotbroken, and I'll put that link in the show notes and on our website as well. All right, let's get started. Hi, Dr. Bojana.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us again on Invisible Not Broken. I'm really excited to have you back here because clearly we needed to continue the conversation.
Yes, it's great to be here again.
So I know today we want to talk about putting mindfulness theory into practice. Very useful tool to take on today. And more specifically, how to activate your resilience mindset and use it successfully to cope with your conditions. So I thought we would start with how you generally define mindfulness and go from there.
Absolutely. So I'm actually going to share the definition of mindfulness that comes from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I'll share with you a little bit more about his history as well as the history of mindfulness-based stress reduction research. But first, let's get to the definition, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about meditation and mindfulness. And mindfulness meditation is one type of a meditation practice that one can adopt that has shown to have tremendous benefits for anxiety, depression, stress, insomnia, chronic pain, irritable bowel syndrome, and the list goes on. Mindfulness is awareness. It is cultivated by paying attention in a very particular and sustained way, and also paying attention on purpose, in this moment and without judgment. Now, it's very difficult to pay attention without judgment because, being human, we are programmed to judge. And there have been studies on this, but we don't really need any studies necessarily to tell us that from the moment that we see somebody, start talking to them, or when we're even assessing a situation in our environment, We are judging because this is part of our protective mechanism. We're judging whether a situation is safe. We're judging whether the person that we're talking to is kind, trustworthy, whether they're entertaining or boring, whether they're angry, upset, or whether they're calm. And so it's normal to have judgments, and it's highly beneficial to have judgments. But what we really mean by paying attention non judgmentally is to be able to take a step back from that innate, from that natural judgment, and be able to observe it and say, I'm judging. I realize that. That is okay. It's serving a purpose. But let me get curious about that judgment. Let me get curious about why I'm judging, what I'm judging, and what kind of information I'm getting from this. So that's where the judgment component comes in. And then, of course, when it comes to paying attention, well, in today's world, we know that it's so hard to pay attention because we're constantly multitasking. And when we're multitasking, our attention goes from our phone to our
My
computer.
apologies. I couldn't hear what
Oh,
you
I
said.
think Siri was spying on me actually, and my Siri on my phone just said, I apologize. I couldn't hear what you said. So there goes my attention. But when we're paying attention to our computer, our phone, we're having a conversation at the same time. Maybe the TV is on. Maybe we have multiple screens open on our computer and are going back between our email and maybe something that was on our to do at work. We're constantly doing multiple things at the same time. Well, number one, we know that this is actually negative for our efficiency. We're actually about a quarter more, or I should say, 4 times less efficient when we're multitasking than when we're actually single tasking. So that attention to one thing at the present moment is very, very important. But not only are we more efficient, we're also more in touch with what's going on in here and in here, what's going on inside. We're more in touch with the information that we're processing, and we're able to process it in a deeper way. And we're also able to connect to people better. I mean, just think about it. Let's say you're having a conversation with a friend, and let's say you're both on your phones. You're also kind of like trying to like answer some texts there, like getting your notifications or whatnot, and you're trying to have a conversation at the same time with another person. Well, it's not going to be an engaging, very deep, meaningful conversation. But if you're making eye contact, if you're only paying attention to each other, and if there aren't these other distractions, these other stimuli around, you're actually having a meaningful conversation. And if at that same time, you're also cultivating that non judgment and you're in this present moment fully, well, then you're having a mindful conversation. So that could be one example of that. And just to share with you another kind of interesting fact about this judgment, because I really was um, astounded by this when I first read it. So there is a study where they, by these Princeton psychologists, where they exposed people to photos of different individuals, and it was determined that within a fraction of a second, within about 100 milliseconds, these subjects formed judgments about these people on the photographs. So clearly, this is something that we're doing all the time, subconsciously. And again, it's a good protective mechanism. We don't want to resist it or go against it, but we just want to take a step back, observe it, and get curious about it.
I like that we went right into judgment when
Mm.
when first talking about mindfulness, because I don't personally think that that is what most people would go to when they think about mindfulness, but it is exactly that. Whether it be um, internal judgment or external
Mm.
judgment, it's always there, and the first step is to be aware that it exists. Um,
Yes.
and I know we were also talking about, and I would before this, the first step towards mindfulness, right? Is
Yes, absolutely. And you know, the first kind of this I wanted to emphasize also in terms of paying attention, when we're talking about paying attention to what's going on inside for us as well as what's going on outside. Well, in terms of what's going on inside, I mean, how often do you pay attention to your breath, right? Unless, you're already meditating or doing yoga, and during those activities you are paying attention to your breath, right? But during your regular day, you're going about your grocery shopping, you're um, doing work, you're reading something, are you really paying attention to your breath? No, because again, this is something that our nervous system does subconsciously, because if we really had to pay attention to our breath in order to breathe, we would be long dead. So we do not need to. This is not an essential function to pay attention to our breath. But if you do every once in a while catch yourself, pay attention and start catching yourself, we notice that oftentimes we're actually breathing fast and we're taking shallow breaths. And this is something that plays an important role in the physiology of mindfulness. When we start paying attention and then start shifting our breathing pattern.
What do you think about paying attention when you're in pain? So think about something that where you might not want to be paying attention. Where is it beneficial in those moments where it's really difficult for some of us? It could be acute pain. It could be pain that's been going on for hours or days.
And this is extremely challenging because the instinct when we're in pain is that we just want to jump out of our bodies. We are not wanting to engage with or pay attention to what's going on in our bodies. And the one analogy that I can use for myself personally is when I delivered my two babies, I did so without an epidural. So I know that extreme 100 out of 10 pain that just makes you want to not just scream really, but I've bitten people during labor. I mean, it's that excruciating. And so I can relate in that momentary um uh, uh time frame to what excruciating pain might be like. When we talk about chronic pain, right, this is constant pain or maybe intermittent chronic pain that comes and goes. And certainly the instinct then is also to again disengage from our bodies, to disengage from that, to run away from it, to reject it. One of the very important elements of mindfulness is acceptance. And that also refers to acceptance to discomfort. This could be emotional discomfort or physical discomfort. What this acceptance leads to is ultimately, as we're then doing a deeper dive in mindfulness and starting that mindfulness practice, is this acceptance can lead to improvement in symptoms. But until we reach that stage of acceptance, it's going to be very difficult to practice and to really derive all the benefits of mindfulness or mindfulness based stress reduction.
What does acceptance look like when you have pain? Because I was thinking, okay, I'm in a state of incredible pain here. I can't think about anything else. Accepting it in my pessimistic mindset is like, yeah, I have pain. I get it. I accept that this is happening to me. But
Mhm.
I, the word acceptance to me can go in two different directions. It just at least when I don't think about it extensively. Those being passive and active acceptance. Passive is like, okay, yeah, I get it. I have this, or this is going on. And
Mhm.
active maybe being, okay, I'd like to hear what you say, but my general thought is, all right, this is what's going on. I'm
Mhm.
aware of that, and therefore I have a say in how I'm going to react to it.
Right, right. Um, I like how you broke it down into active and passive, and I absolutely agree with that. I think that taking the element of taking charge of and believing that there's something that you can do for yourself to take charge of that perception is extremely important, because when we don't feel that we have any kind of weight or power over this, then how can we possibly get on that path to healing uh, if we just don't think that, well, no matter what I do, this I'm going to be perceiving this pain in just the same way. And then the other important piece to acknowledge is that it's not the acceptance, it's not necessarily an action that takes place and that's it, it's a process. So the process of acceptance and then accepting the process of acceptance is really important. And one very interesting study that actually looked at mindfulness and the perception of pain was done in 14 long-term meditators and 14 matched controls. And in this study, they actually exposed the individuals with a thermal stimulus, so with a hot stimulus, and they found that experienced meditators reported equal pain intensity to the matched controls, but they reported less unpleasantness from the pain than novices, which I thought was, and again, it's a small study, 14 versus 14, but I thought that was really quite interesting. And I'm happy to share the reference to the study so that your listeners can see. But I thought that was, to me, when I first was, this is a study from 2013. When I first read this study, I was really impressed because this was also around the time that I was starting to go on my own mindfulness and meditation journey. And as an internal medicine physician at the time who hadn't really had any exposure to mindfulness or any other form of meditation, I was very skeptical, but was just so impressed at our body's ability to uh, transform something like a pain stimulus, which we would think, well, the thermal stimulus was objectively administered and the same dose was given, yet these individuals experienced it so differently. And I have a graph as well that I wish I could share, but again, it's something that we can post so that your listeners can see.
That really is fascinating. It I'm at the same time not so surprised personally. And I'm trying to think of an example where I had seen that benefit, but I know that there are times I can tell a difference between the days where I meditate, or really just for me, that could be sitting still and breathing and paying attention to
Mhm.
my body.
Yeah.
But even then, I just see a difference physically in my day and how I experience the day. So I haven't tried burning myself.
Right. Yeah, and don't do this at home, please.
Yeah, don't try this at home. But I would not be surprised if that were the case, and I'd actually like to experiment on
Yeah.
that. Again, not burning myself, but just certain pain experiences or
Just
just experiences.
and if and you know and if one of the things that you may do is you may keep a journal, so you can uh, notice the differences in the journal prior to starting a consistent mindfulness practice and after, and then just noticing the chronic pain as it arises and then how you respond to it when you've been meditating consistently versus when you haven't, and seeing what that difference is.
And so we're talking about mindfulness, but of course there's different ways to be mindful. I know we talked about just awareness as being kind of the gateway, right?
Mhm.
That's the first level. And then what are the actual kinds of practices of mindfulness? Meditation, as we said, of course, um, being the go-to. But what does meditation look like, right? Because there's so many different kinds of meditation.
Yes. So maybe we can break down meditation first into different kinds of meditation, and then we can talk a little bit more specifically about mindfulness based stress reduction, which is a type of meditation practice, and then how we can practice it, because there's certainly no one way to do it. And one of the things that I often hear from patients, and I definitely was in this boat as well when I first started, was that during that half an hour or hour that I meditate or do yoga, I feel perfectly zen. I feel perfectly, stable and calm. And then I go out there into my day to day life and I'm so easily triggered by, again, it could be work, it could be emails, it could be maybe an argument, or whether it's something at home or at work. So what the idea is of these mindfulness practices is not that you just have this 1 hour of calm, or I mean, who really has an hour in today to meditate? Let's say you're doing it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes every day. Well, the goal is not just to have you feel calm and zen for those 20 to 30 minutes. The goal is really to translate this to your day to day, and to really kind of make this part of the routine, not just for the purpose of having some transient relief, but to have it carry throughout the rest of the day. And so we can definitely talk about some of the different ways. So as I'm sure you know, the history of mindfulness is that, and meditation is that really it kind of started as a spiritual practice, which very much today it's not for the most part. And many religions have practices that are very similar to mindfulness. And so this is something that is very much ancient and used to be aligned with a spiritual or a religious practice. Um, in terms of mindfulness based stress reduction, specifically, it originates from the Buddhist tradition and it adopts some of the Buddhist beliefs and practices. Um, in terms of the different types of meditation itself, so they're the kind of meditations that very much incorporate visualizations, different types of rituals, chanting. So that could be one form of meditation. There are other forms that, again, more like the mindfulness based stress reduction that I was sharing, this kind of choiceless or open awareness, right? So we'll talk a little bit about the body scan, which is a common mindfulness based stress reduction meditation practice where we're aware of what's going on, again, physically, emotionally, the thoughts that come up for us, and we gain curiosity and we start to kind of ask questions about it rather than judging, rejecting, making it go away. But it's this choiceless awareness. We're going in with no specific agenda, with no chant, with no specific mantra. There are also the mantra based meditations, such as in the Ayurvedic traditions or the transcendental meditation, where an individual is assigned a specific mantra, and then as they're meditating, they're basically repeating this mantra uh, in the quiet, quietly inside their head. Now, the other option as well that I oftentimes recommend for my beginning meditators that feel like it's so hard to quiet my mind, and again, we'll discuss this myth as well. It's really not about quieting your mind, but for individuals that very much feel like I just can't sit in silence, it's going to make me more nervous, I oftentimes recommend guided meditations, and there's so many wonderful ones. And again, as I was mentioning to you earlier, I have a lot of these resources that I like and use personally on my website. But again, we can share the links that people can explore because it sometimes is about finding the right fit and something that really resonates with you. So the subject of the guided meditation, the voice of the person, the pace. I find that when I'm in that state where I'm ready to meditate, these things really, really matter in terms of how engaged I'm going to stay, how much I'm going to really focus on this and start like letting it really flow. So again, there are a lot of resources available, but just some things to be aware of. There are definitely different entry points into the meditation world, and there's definitely no single way to do it, and also no wrong way to do it. That's another one of my pet peeves. You'll often be asked, am I doing it the right way? And there are definitely certain recommendations and certain tips that I give, but there's no right or wrong way to do it. And and more importantly, the distinction is not to really do it but to be it, because when we're talking about meditation and mindfulness, and also the way that we really want to let this translate into the rest of our lives, is we want it to translate in who we are, not in what we do, the actions that we take necessarily, but who we are, because that's automatically going to be reflected in the actions that are then consequences of that. So the focus is on being rather than am I doing this correctly?
Oh, exactly. That's a really great distinction. Um, and I think that's something I really wanted to distinguish in talking about this is not just learning what mindfulness and meditation is, but how it can be applied to your life as an individual. Everything that I talk about and promote is personalization, customization, because we're all different. Uh, and while there are tools that are going to be maybe more useful for more people than not, we all have different environments at the very least. Actually, that's like the thing we probably have the closest to in common. um, but so for me, an example would be the app Headspace, which a lot of people know about. I think it might be the most popular. Um, I've used Headspace as well as tried others. I like the guy's voice on Headspace the best. For me, that happened to work really well. They have like a 10-day trial where you can listen to the 10-day, I think, intro meditations. And I got really hooked on that. I like to meditate. I always say, again, meditate loosely because I don't actually think I fully meditate, but do my, what do you call it, like body stem awareness
Mhm.
and breathing practices in my leather armchair.
Mhm.
Some people do it on the floor. Some people do it in more of an upright chair. Some people stand, I've heard.
Mhm.
People do it in all different ways or lying in the bed. I like being in my chair. That is the place where I feel like I can let my body really sink in and become very in tune with um, my chair. I like to not have music on otherwise.
Mhm.
Love music. Some people love essential oils. I actually like in what's it called? Diffusing. So
Mhm. Yes.
yeah, like I actually do have one and I don't use it nearly enough, but lavender is really calming.
Yeah.
And yeah, diffusers are
Lemon
basically
balm as well is great. Mhm.
balm.
Lemon balm.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, I love both of those smells. But just having that essence in the air is really good. Lavender, I even use at night actually to calm me. But so that's just a little anecdote. Those are some things that I do that work for me, but they might not work for everybody.
And I love you touched on actually several really, really important points. One of them being that you have your leather chair, right? And you probably experimented with different places and in your home, and found that okay, this is what works for me. I've even had patients that had a busy home and work life where they felt that I'm never alone in either one of these places, and I had suggested meditating in the car once they park the car, of course, not while driving. And that works well for some people. Let's say you pull into your um, driveway and you park and just have those, even if it's just 5 minutes, have the 5-minute meditation before you enter another type of busy chaos, chaotic environment. Because again, it also helps us go from one mode to another. And a lot of us can be very different in our work mode versus our home mode, um, and want a little bit of that separation and that clearing. But I think that recognizing definitely that different environments may work better for you. And ideally, if you can, though, I would say finding a place in your home that feels safe, that's quiet, that's calm, and finding a time, of course, that's calm, because especially for people that have kids or pets, even, there are times of the day that things are quite hectic, and so you may not have that calm, between um, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., but you might have that calm either later at night or first thing in the morning if you wake up at 6 a.m. and that's the time that you choose to meditate. So definitely thinking about the time that works for you and thinking about the place that works for you. And ideally, if you have the space, whether it's putting that diffuser there, or putting a candle that you light, or having some kind of a routine associated with it. I found that that works very well for a lot of people, where you attach it to a routine that's part of your mindfulness and meditation routine. And oftentimes, I love that you mentioned lavender, because we associate scents to different emotions and different things that we do. So again, that's a nice coupling there of just having something that you associate with doing meditation, and that kind of gets you into that mental zone, of doing the act of meditation. But I think that also tying it into a routine that you do before or after, that's another very important thing, because again, for listeners who are either new to meditation or the ones that have maybe done it before and are currently not doing it and thinking about getting back into it. And we've all experienced it. I mean, I certainly have times that I go without meditation and then I get back on it. And but the best way to really stick to a habit is to attach it to another habit that you already do, no question. So whether it's, after I brush my teeth, I'm going to do my body scan, or just before I go to bed, I'm going to listen to my 21-day meditation by Deepak Chopra and Oprah, or having it or sometimes after exercise. Actually, that's another time that I like to do it, because I feel like that physically I've kind of exhausted myself, and so I don't have that fidgety feeling anymore, and that desire for movement, and like, oh, I can't sit still. So you may choose, okay, after I do my workout, I'm going to do my 10 minutes or however many minutes of a guided meditation or mantra or body scan, whatever it may be. So tying it to an activity that you already do is key in building up that meditation practice. And then on top of that, tying it with a place, a specific place that is conducive to meditating. So again, quiet place, safe space where you feel like, again, if it's somewhere outside of your home, you want to make sure that if it's your office, you can shut the door or put a sign on that you're meditating or busy or please do not disturb. Because again, you don't want to have to be so on alert about what if somebody walks in, what if something else happens. You want to really allow yourself and your body to enter that quiet safe zone. And then, as we mentioned, um, tying it to a ritual. It can also be beneficial, and again, kind of putting that whole experience together for yourself. And then in terms of, um, mentioning the Headspace app, I think that's great, works for a lot of people. There's the Insight Timer app that I also really like. And then there are also some other free resources online that, again, we'll share the websites of different kinds of meditations. So maybe we'll kind of get into the different mindfulness based stress reduction meditation strategies. Because this is a question that I get asked a lot. What do I start? How do I start? And I think sometimes the best way is to just try. And if one thing doesn't work for you, maybe it's again, it doesn't work for you because of the particular time that you've tried it, and you kind of leave it alone and try something else. Or maybe this is just not compatible with who you are, with your lifestyle, and then, again, move on to something else. But in terms of the mindfulness based stress reduction, so there's the body scan. And oftentimes this can be helpful for people who have chronic pain, also people that have gone through surgeries or even other types of, again, conditions that have affected their body or caused physical pain, whether currently or in the past. It can be quite a healing experience, is really what I've observed with my patients and other individuals that I've worked with or know that have been doing the consistent mind body um, the body scan mindfulness practices. And so, what this involves in just very simple terms is exactly what it sounds like, body scan. So, you're literally going from either head to toe, or you could start in your toes and work your way up. And there are guided meditations that you can get for free that'll lead you through the body scan. And once you get comfortable, you can do it on your own. The one thing that may happen, and this is with any meditation, and this has actually sometimes even happened, sometimes I'll guide, a group of people through a meditation for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. If you're really tired and somebody's guiding you through a meditation, or you're doing it on your own, you may fall asleep. It will happen. And again, it's not that you did something wrong. It's a great thing to note. Wow, maybe I'm a little sleep deprived. Let me look at my sleep hygiene and what I can do in that department. But in terms of the body scan itself, starting at your toes, slowly working your way up, and really what you're doing during those times is, you may kind of wiggle your toes when you're there, or depending on what body your what part of the body you're at, you may notice how it feels. You may notice, let's say, if we're talking about um, your feet and your toes, you may notice just the sensation of your feet touching the ground, or touching your shoes or your socks or whatever else you're wearing. Just how does that feel? What are the sensations that I have right now? And then you slowly work your way up. And that is really the body scan. Now, there's another form as well that one can do, and this is my favorite, and this is especially great when you're in need of comfort, whether it's because of a particularly stressful situation, or feeling alone, or feeling that you've been back to judgment, too judgmental towards yourself, maybe for some reason. is the loving kindness meditation. I love the loving kindness meditation. And again, this is something that I'll provide the resource so that listeners can go on, but there are some wonderful free resources for this. And it's a guided meditation that really helps one center. It's kind of a heart centered meditation. It really centers around the heart, and it helps us kind of really provide that loving kindness, because we all need loving kindness, but especially at times of stress, um, is when we need it the most. And that's the time where we don't want to seek a big challenge, but where we really just kind of want to stay in our comfort zone. And we'll talk a little bit more about that actually, because I think that's an important point to touch upon just in the whole kind of mindfulness and exploring the different modalities as well. And then there's the walking meditation. So for individuals who feel that, there's no way that I can start with this, I am just, I really need movement. So one recommendation that I make is what I said earlier: start with, do an exercise, do whatever you typically do for exercise, and then attach the meditation right after that, because physically you would be then more likely to be comfortable lying still or sitting still. But the other option is to choose to do walking meditation. um, Ideally, I would recommend doing this in an environment where we're not too distracted, and not on a busy street, ideally, although really technically you could do it anywhere. And ideally also not where there's traffic, because you really kind of, again, want to be focused on what's going on inside. And also you want to be focused on the sensations and not really looking out, again, activating our sympathetic nervous system here and watching out for cars, and are we going to bump into someone, or is somebody going to bump into us? But really, again, focusing within. So whether this is something that one can do in their apartment or in their backyard if they have a house, again, another great practice. And this really involves just taking very slow steps with purpose. And again, there are examples of this that I'm sure people can find online, where again it's just very very slow steps on purpose, and noticing literally how each part of your foot touches the floor, how each part of your body starts to move in kind of in sync and in sequence. And that would be the walking meditation. And the other form of mindfulness that oftentimes is helpful for people, and especially, again, going back to our busy lifestyles, and as well as people who are suffering from any gut issues, is mindful eating. So there is a raisin exercise that I did a while back, and I recorded a video on it. It's on my website as well, but it's a very well known raisin exercise that's part of the mindfulness based stress reduction curriculum. And it's funny, when I first did it, I actually don't like raisins. And so I was thinking already, oh, I got to do this exercise with a raisin. I don't like the taste of raisins. I don't want to do it. And I listened to, I don't know if it was, again, content by John Kabat-Zinn, again, the founder of mindfulness based stress reduction, or maybe it was one of my instructors. But they specifically, and I don't know if it was written or something on audio, but they specifically, spoke to people like me who were like, well, even if you don't like raisins, and even if you don't, buy into this kind of thing, like, we urge you to try it. It's a really helpful exercise. So what we did, and it must have taken us at least 10 minutes to complete this exercise. Now it's just one raisin. You're eating one raisin for 10 minutes. But what it is before you even put the raisin close to your mouth, you're observing it. You're looking at the color. You're looking at the creases in the raisin. You're feeling the texture with your fingers. You're really observing the shape. And then slowly you put it to your nose. You smell it. Oh, what does it smell like? Okay. You might even put it to your ear and observe what it sounds like when you're rubbing your fingers with the raisin. Then you finally put it to your mouth. What does it feel like on my lips? And then finally, what does it feel like in my mouth? And then you really feel, probably more intensely than ever, because the exercise takes so long and you're really just paying attention to this one raisin and nothing else, the amount of saliva, and you just feel that salivary response of like, when am I going to eat this raisin? And I will say again, never been a fan of raisins, the level of flavor and the juice and the sweetness that came out of that particular raisin was just off the charts. But again, it really tells you how mindfulness can completely change your perception of something that seems objective. Whether we're talking about that pain stimulus or whether we're talking about this little raisin, that again, it's a raisin to you, it's a raisin to me, it's a raisin to everybody else out there. But the perception of eating that raisin, again, in a state of mindfulness while we're cultivating and practicing mindfulness versus when, I'm on my email and kind of, doing my work and then just kind of shoving some food in my mouth is completely different. I mean, and so the reason that I mentioned mindful eating, there are two actually. So one is because I see a lot of patients with irritable bowel syndrome and with other gut issues, and mindful eating is very important. Slow, meaningful eating, allowing ourselves time to chew, right, where the digestive process starts, is extremely important. And again, I cannot emphasize enough how the pace of today's life and the amount of multitasking and the kind of um, this reward based environment that is where rewards are based on how quickly we can do something, um, how many things we get done. Again, it's about doing and not being, is very much the opposite of what I'm talking about today, um, and opposite to mindful eating, to taking the time to notice what our food is, to taking the time to really engage all of our senses, and then taking the time to properly chew so that we can start the digestive process and get our body ready and start the release of digestive enzymes, and then slowly mindfully eat. So that is one reason for a lot of people with gut issue. This is very, very helpful. It's not something that's going to help cure, but it's certainly a necessary step in helping to heal. And then the other reason is that people who are looking to mindfully eat because they're scared, they're concerned that their binge eating has gotten out of control, or they can't control themselves because of cravings at times, or they just feel that their portion sizes are too much. Maybe they're not necessarily binging, but they're overeating, and they're not necessarily being able to detect when they're full. So again, mindful eating and eating that slowly is going to allow our body the time to send a signal from our stomach as our stomach stretches, right? When we're eating foods that are rich in fiber, our stomach is going to go ahead and stretch, and we're going to get the signal back to our brain saying, you know what, I'm full, I'm good, you can stop now. And so, again, it's something that'll help prevent overeating as well. And studies have been done on this, and mindful eating can be actually very helpful in terms of helping cultivate healthier eating habits as well.
Mindfulness eating is now almost trendy in a way,
Yeah,
which I like because it is anti-dieting. It's wonderful that we're taking sort of this the industry of dieting and
mhm.
translate or transforming it into a mindfulness practice and also a self-love practice, which
100%. Yes, exactly. It's not about restriction. It's not about deprivation, but it's really about being in tune with our bodies. And, oftentimes, um, when my kids will say, Mommy, can I have more? Can I? And I'll ask, how does your body feel? What do you think? And it's funny, actually, my daughter caught me, it was a few weeks ago, I believe. She caught me eating very fast. I was like clearly getting on to my, thinking about, okay, what do I have to do next? And kind of, and just kind of trying to, she was like, Mom, and the power of, the beginner's mind, right? And well, we can talk about beginner's mind because that's really important in cultivating a healthy mindfulness practice. But the beginner's mind of a 7.5-year-old saying, Mommy, why are you eating so fast? And she really caught me, and I thought, my gosh, Olivia, I am. You're 100% right. I don't know. I guess I was, really kind of thinking about the things that I have to do, and sort of subconsciously rushing myself. Um, and so again, just monitor. I mean, we all do it, but again, as we are more kind of start to really cultivate the single task type of approach, will gain more awareness, and then we don't have to have other people telling us, "Hey, you're doing." But when they do, that's wonderful. How great, to welcome that feedback, and then to modify as a result. But I think that's very, you know very important to cultivate that awareness. Um,
There's so I brought out this thing from my desk. I wrote a little while ago. I wrote intuitive eating on it. There's a book about it. It's like a movement now, I guess, which is what I was uh, more referring to. And I wrote these 10 steps. I have it here,
oh, wonderful.
like reminder. And what I just glanced at them quickly, and I realized that each one of these steps is related to mindfulness. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, the first one
What are
is,
the steps? Yeah, share them.
yeah, so the first one is reject diet mentality.
Mhm.
There's so never think that there's dieting in your future, not like today, tomorrow. It's not non-existent. And that's a practice of mindfulness because it's being aware of how you normally think. So I know that I've definitely, and many of us have thought, oh well, I'm going to diet tomorrow, or I'm going to be better at this tomorrow or next week or whenever.
Mhm.
I'm going to go on this diet, this way of living.
Right.
But if you are mindful and listening to that voice, because sometimes that voice is very quiet, very,
Yes.
and so it's the perfect first step to shock you. Be like, no, I know where your mind's going.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Come back, come back. There's
Mhm.
none of that in your future. Number two is honor your hunger. So ask what
Mhm.
level of full you are. Definitely about kind of scanning your body and your mind and what is it telling you here. Like
Mhm.
ask yourself honestly. Uh, all these steps, what I notice for sure is that it's all about being honest with yourself.
Mhm.
Truly,
Mhm.
truly
Yes.
honest. And that's another way you could describe mindfulness as being very honest with your body and your mind.
Yes.
Number three is make peace with food. So don't use words like shouldn't and can't. That's mindfulness in your speech, and,
Mhm.
as well as your thoughts. Like I
And
can't.
judgment, right,
Oh,
exactly.
serious.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Challenge the food police. Disregard good or bad. There are no rules.
Mhm.
Even me as a nutritionist in my past, I would say to people, don't label a food as good or bad.
Yeah.
I definitely do it though. Be like, oh, I did it to you before this call. You know, I said I was having fog, and
Oh, yes, that's
yeah,
right.
I
Yes.
did. That's
Yes.
really funny. I said, oh, I'm pretty sure I know why I have really bad fog and pain today. It's because it was the Jewish holidays, and we eat a lot of food
Mhm.
during those holidays, and I was not paying attention to what I was eating. I was
Right.
enjoying it. That's the good part about it. But my body is yelling at me for it. And I said that I was eating bad food.
Food, right, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So definite judgment, even if it's the truth, it was still a
Right.
judgment call. And being aware of that judgment uh,
Mhm.
is really important. Feel your fullness. Seems similar to the other, but stop while eating and reflect on taste. So, yeah, taste on and fullness and how your like your senses physically
Mhm.
feeling there. Discover the satisfaction factor. Find pleasure in the eating experience.
Yes, that's so important.
As
And
that raisin, very appealing to.
pleasure of the raisin, yeah. And the other thing again that we haven't, um, talked about yet, but also within the scope of that mindfulness, the power of human connection, right? And in mindful again, and speaking about mindful eating, uh, one of the things that um, we should recognize as well is that it's now less common for families to sit down and have meals together, and that's really really important, again, not in just cultivating mindful eating, but also in cultivating connection and meaning, and having support system. And I actually, a couple of years ago, had the pleasure of interviewing this physician from a small town of Arzana in Sardinia. And Arzana is special because it's one of the 5 blue zones in the world. And blue zones are these places where there's the highest density of centenarians, so people who live above 100, compared to other parts of the world. And so I had the pleasure of interviewing this physician, and we talked about, what is it that makes, because in the different blue zones, people eat very different diets. And in the people that this physician interviewed, as well as in a woman that I had the pleasure of interviewing, was 99 and just this amazing woman in the little town of Arzana. What I found was that people had very different eating habits. Some were vegetarian, some drank wine, others didn't. Some ate lard, others didn't. I mean, there was a huge variation in terms of specifically what they ate. But the one thing that was in common, the 0 kilometer diet, eat things in season, where in the region where you're from, and also eat with your family, eat with your loved ones, enjoy the act of eating, because they don't think of the way they think of food is just so different. And I think that kind of really goes to the point of these 10 um 10 kind of rules of intuitive eating, or what you would call it, because it's not necessarily about saying this is good, this is bad, but it's about, okay, well, I may indulge in this or whatnot, but then really the point is I'm here to nourish myself and do so together with my family while we're enjoying each other's company, and sharing this beautiful experience of food.
Food can absolutely be a meditative experience, in
Mhm.
my opinion. And while I don't do it all the time either, by any means, if I had a 7-year-old daughter, she'd probably call me out too. Uh, but when I'm eating something that one or I would typically label as bad food, something that's very obviously not going to nourish my body, for me, my biggest weakness is really good pasta with a cream sauce,
Mhm.
especially if there's truffle oil in it. That I mean, that just I don't know if it's fiber or what, but I swear I get like a little high from that.
Mhm.
And I will put everything down, like, and away, like my phone's away, and I will just indulge in every bite. And
Enjoy
I
the
really feel it.
experience.
I also forbid it at the table anywhere for people to talk about food being unhealthy or them feeling bad or having judgment while they're eating it. They shouldn't do it after
Yeah,
any, but
yeah,
while, well, then you're just totally wasting the experience completely.
exactly, right, exactly, yeah.
That I never understood. I was like, eat
Okay,
your pizza. Decide what you want to do about that later if you don't want to eat that again anytime soon. But don't talk negatively or judge yourself or the situation while you're enjoying it. And I think that's an important part of mindful eating too. Maybe it's not going to be what's best for your body, but if you have that awareness, it's going to impact that moment and thereafter.
definitely, definitely, yes. And even, Ayurveda talks about um, cooking mindfully, and putting your best energy and thoughts into food, or even prayers into food, and good emotions that are then going to, there's a belief that the energy that you bring in when you're preparing food is going to be the energy that then feeds the individuals that are eating that food. And I think that's just such a beautiful kind of way of thinking about it. And there's definitely something to be said about the energy with which we're consuming the food as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
we know that the process in which we consume stress ultimately determines if that stress is going to be perceived by our body as a positive versus a negative, and then lead to premature death. There's actually a fascinating TED talk also on my resources page, by this woman who talks about studies that have been done where individuals who think, oh, stress is bad, and I'm constantly under stress, they actually live shorter lives than individuals that are like, I have stress, bring it on, I'm going to get like even better. And even, and those individuals don't. So the same thing goes with food in a way. Not that we should all be eating processed and junk food all the time, but to have that positive mindset of, you know what, it's okay to indulge. It's okay to have it's good to have a variety of different foods, and not to feel, and then when we make a choice to have a little indulgence, that's okay. Like, don't feel bad about it. Bring good energy into it.
Ooh, yeah, I love that. That's interesting. Totally makes sense. In that case, I think I'm doing relatively well. I love when my doctors ask me how I'm doing.
Mhm.
They say, "Are you stressed?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but nothing's abnormal and I'm happy." And
Yeah.
generally, I am happy and stressed, but hopefully that's definitely having a better impact than when I am not. I did have a flare up once from being acutely stressed from something that was very positive, like it was good news that shocked
Mm.
me that I had palpitations and then had a flare up. But that's not typical.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
I think it was because I
Definitely.
had palpitations, like my body just reacted so
Yeah.
strongly to it.
Yeah.
I did, but the fact that it was surprising to me that I got a flare is telling, right?
Mhm.
We usually have flares, or if we're aware of why we have flares, we'll associate it with a negative stimulus of something stressful. But and perhaps it's for that reason because if it's not a negative thing but it's still stressful, you have that give it that positive energy. I think
Yes.
my experience was just a lot, but that hasn't happened to me any other time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have lots of other positive stressors like making events for Wellacopia or doing podcasts.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's a good example. Um, so I did want to ask something that I thought of a little earlier. So when in talking about eating and loving kindness and walking, talking, and body scans, which by the way I have personal experiences with all of those I could talk about. Um, I thought of something that I have not done,
Mhm.
I think could be useful to a lot of people listening, which is a mindfulness practice specifically before and or after seeing a doctor.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I've never done that, but it sounds like the right thing, a really positive thing to do.
I hear you. I think that uh, that is such an interesting question, and absolutely has a role because a lot of us when we go, I mean, even I at times when I go to see a doctor, there's that sense of, even though like I spend so much time in hospitals and feel at home and absolutely, this is my territory. Um, there's definitely that sense of you just feel a little bit more kind of on edge, and you feel that sympathetic drive, and I think it can be helpful. So what I've done in the past when let's say I've had to have a medical procedure or something that was giving me a little bit of added stress that I wanted to work on, one very simple thing one could do is actually a breathing exercise. And then that could be followed by a mindfulness practice. So, one of the breathing exercises that I absolutely love, that I use myself all the time, it's helped many of my patients who have a history of panic attacks. It's helped them reduce the amount of medications, benzodiazepines, that they use for the panic attacks. Um, and overall it helps in even just kind of regulating our day-to-day levels of stress. So this exercise was taught by Dr. Andrew Weil at a seminar that I went to, and I just found that it's so powerful that I'd love to share it with you today. So it's the 478 breath, and there is actually a great video that we can link to as well for everybody to see. But essentially, what we're going to do, and we can do a demo of a couple of breaths, and then individuals can do it while they're listening to us. So, what we'll do is we'll inhale for 4, or hold our breath for 7, and then we'll exhale for 8. And what we'll do is we'll inhale through the nose. And then, as I said, hold for 7. And then as we exhale, we'll just kind of make a swooshing sound while our tongue is just touching our front upper teeth, just between the ridge of the tissue in the front upper teeth.
Hmm.
And we'll do the swoosh. Normally, I recommend 4 breath cycles twice a day, and then you could also do 4 breath cycles in a particularly stressful situation. So, let's say you're waiting at the doctor's office, or somewhere else where you're just starting to feel that maybe those palpitations are coming on, or stress is being provoked. So, what we can do is I can do one, and then we could do another one together if you'd like. And then for those individuals that are watching the video, I'm actually just going to show with my fingers as well what I'm doing in terms of the counting. But for everybody else, we can count, you can count inside your head for 4, and then 7 while you're holding, and then 8 as you're exhaling. Okay, so we'll start on a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And we'll do one more. Normally we would do 4, but
Mhm.
uh, it generally, how do you feel?
I, I love taking deep breaths.
Yeah.
Um, I've found, oh, here's my other thing on my table. So one was intuitive eating. What's the other one? Breath.
Breathing. I love it.
Yep. Yep. I find it to be incredibly helpful, but I've never done that breath work, and I am definitely going to try on doing this 4 cycles twice a day, right?
Yes, 4 cycles twice a day. And the beauty in taking a long exhale is actually our heart rate decelerates as we're exhaling. So, and then it accelerates as we're inhaling. So, with this, we're actually also controlling our heart rate. And if we were to do other types of breathing exercises through biofeedback, we also would be controlling our heart rate variability, which is again another very powerful tool to control how we respond to stress, to help with anxiety, depression, and even to help with people who have high blood pressure, among again a whole number of chronic conditions. But again, there are really breathing is an extremely powerful underutilized tool, right? Because most of the time, again, we don't need to be aware of our breath, so we're not.
Yeah. And we breathe so shallowly.
Yeah,
Shallow.
shallow read. Yeah, do. I mean, it's true. We and again, that sends signals to our heart, and it sends it sends a certain it causes our rate variability to not necessarily be in the most optimal state. And so again, by doing these other breathing exercises that are part of the heart rate variability biofeedback, we can also control our heart rate variability, which then in turn, it's related to our nervous system, and it's related to again how we perceive stressful situations, and then just in general how we deal with stress, anxiety, depression, insomnia, and physiological processes such as high blood pressure.
I think it was when I was in Israel almost a decade ago, living there, and I got really bad food poisoning. Unfortunately, food poisoning that has affected me for years, really afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, and I was in hospital because I became clinically dehydrated. But and then I was just having terrible cramps. And one of the nurses said to me, "Take deep breaths." And I remember looking at her like, "What do you mean, take deep
What
breaths? You're telling me
are
breath like that's going to do anything right now? It feels like my insides are dying." and and but I did, and I took now I didn't do exactly the counts that you said, but I took really deep breaths and then exhaled for a long time afterwards, and it absolutely took away the edge. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't believe it. So now I've always done that when my pain is really bad, like something very like acutely painful, I take really deep long breaths.
Yeah,
Also
yeah,
calms me at the same time.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
that
Really
alone I have
calming.
seen work. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's truly been helpful. Um, I realize that we have to wrap up in a sec, but there is so much more I still want to talk about. I hate how this happens. Um, Now, something I would like to touch on is in applying this and others applying this to their lives.
Yeah.
Uh, One thing that I think, or a couple things that tend to put people off are, other than being able to just fit it in because they've never done, is
Mhm.
the trial and error. Because so many of us do trial and error with all types of treatments, and this definitely requires some trial and error. Trial
Mhm.
and error meaning it's going to be different for every person. Like I said about my chair and the noise and the when like there's so many variations. So
Absolutely.
one, trial and error, and then also consistency.
Yes. It's very important. And in really kind of helping to maintain that consistency, it's really important that number one, you set realistic goals. So it may be that a lot of studies were done on 20 minutes of meditation twice a day, or some studies were done on these meditation retreats. And of course, that's not realistic for most people. So, what you can do is instead of setting a goal that, okay, 95%, there's a chance that I'm not going to maintain this beyond a week, let's set a goal that's realistic for you. And then what I would say is put it in your phone, put it in your calendar, set an alert, because again, without scheduling time for it, it's not going to happen. Again, a habit is something that's difficult to form. And unless it's something that's really going to kind of, make be a major factor, um, uh, for you to, or make a major difference after just one meditation, you're not going to schedule to do it. And really, we only see results when it's consistently practiced. So I would really encourage everybody who's thinking about trying this to schedule time that's realistic for you. And whether that's 5 minutes or 10 or 20, it it's okay. You can build to it. You can build to it later. So if it's five just now, that's better than doing 20 minutes once every 2 weeks. So being realistic with you, being honest with yourself and being realistic with that. And then the other piece is attaching it to something that you already do. So whether this is attaching it to sleep and doing it first thing in the morning, perfect. After brushing your teeth in the morning, great. Before going to bed, again, the only thing that I would caution people here is if you're really exhausted before you go to bed, chances are you'll fall asleep very quickly. And then again, and that's totally fine, but then you may not derive the benefits of just the meditation itself. Um, on the other hand, however, it can help people go to sleep. It can help people be, part of their sleep hygiene if it's a mantra meditation or if it's a guided meditation to some soothing music. And again, then by all means use it in that way if that works for you. But realistic goals, attaching it to a habit, creating that routine, being mindful of being in a quiet space where you're not going to be interrupted. Um, and then other things that are really important, don't beat yourself up if you don't miss it. Again, just like with anything else, it's easy for us to feel shame or guilt if we eat a food that is bad, or if we do something that we know we shouldn't have, or don't do something that we should have. So don't beat yourself up about it, right? Because that defeats the purpose of being mindful and meditating, right? And then also just think about how this infiltrates your day to day, because that's really the key, right? What we practice gets stronger. So if we practice anger or feeling that we're a victim or feeling that the world is against us or feeling that we're not enough, what we practice gets stronger. But by the same token, if we practice being mindful, being aware, questioning with curiosity, not with judgment, but questioning with curiosity, that's interesting that these feelings are coming up for me. That's interesting that these thoughts are coming up. I wonder what that means. And whether it's a therapist or a health coach or a trusted friend that you discuss that with, questioning with curiosity here is key. um, and really being, accepting rather than rejecting. And so this we can apply to all parts of our lives, right? Being accepting of other people, not having a certain agenda or expectation of others, and then say, well, you disappointed me, you fail, and of course, um, I think it's important to take this in the context of mindfulness. Of course, it doesn't mean that, oh, we'll just go with the flow and whatever happens, happens. But really in the context of mindfulness, being aware of what it is that is going on around us and how we're affected by it. And so when a thought or emotion comes up, rather than getting into the pattern that you normally get into, which can usually be fear based or worry based or anger based, which ultimately is a manifestation of fear. Rather than going into those, think about, oh, I wonder why I feel this way. Let me reflect on that or discuss it with someone, because that's really going to be the key of how you adopt these practices into real life, rather than just say, oh wow, for those 10 minutes I was really mindful and then everything, kind of started crushing down on me, right? Because that's not going to be mindfulness.
I was trying to think of what's sort of the mantra,
Mhm.
ironically, the mantras behind mindfulness. Like, what are the things to keep in mind? and let me know if I'm missing one. Um, there's I don't know if you want to say pushing away judgment or dismissing judgment, consistency, curiosity, which is part of awareness, and
Attention,
attention. Or I guess that's awareness too. But yeah,
awareness, attention. Yeah.
definitely.
Rather than pushing it away, just being curious about it, because again, we don't want to reject, because judgment is part of us, right? And so if we reject it, then we're rejecting something that's part of how we're built, right? So embracing, but questioning it, not taking it at face value, right? And getting curious about it.
Got it. Yeah. So curiosity is really a positive way to say no judgment. Like,
Right, right, exactly. And then also there's kind of the whole, and this is kind of a whole other area, but Pema Chodron talks a lot about attachment, and really kind of oftentimes, we're so attached to certain outcomes, and it's important to have drive and goals and plans 100%. But oftentimes we're so attached to certain outcomes or to certain ways of being or things of being a certain way. I would just say starting to get curious about those attachments as well,
yeah.
because that can be a great source of suffering if not everything goes exactly according to plan. And for the most part in life, things don't go exactly according to plan. So having a plan, having goals, having the drive, having the desires, but then thinking about that relationship with attachment. And Pema Chodron is a great resource for this.
Good. Thank you. I'm glad that you're providing so many resources, and we'll definitely have those in the show notes. But you're a great resource yourself. And I really want to thank you for coming on and diving deeper into what mindfulness actually can look like for individuals and
Mhm.
even those who have never even attempted to practice mindfulness or meditation in their lives.
Yeah,
And I like I'd like to put out there that while consistency is absolutely key in order to get the long-term benefits, just start, as you said.
exactly.
It's just start something. This is making me remember how I can be consistent with it because I'm not right now. I will fully admit that. But I've seen the benefits anytime I do this. Even we were just talking about when I was in pain and breathing deeply.
Yeah,
It this really can have such an enormous impact in your lives. Cancer patients do it and have seen um, massive influence on actual cancer growth. I won't go into that now, but there is a lot of information on that as well.
and
Um,
symptoms of cancer, pain, and
oh,
other. It's really remarkable, the power of
perception,
our mind. Yeah, and
yeah, perception at the very least is huge for mindfulness. Um, so I guess my personal parting words of wisdom are that this is invisible, not broken. We share stories and experiences of living with an invisible illnesses or even the invisible experiences of visible illnesses. So I want to encourage everyone to consider a treatment that is invisible. Just because a treatment is not in medication form or isn't like a physical modality does not mean it's any less effective. In fact, I would argue to say that it's where you need to start with any healing journey.
I completely agree.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. And Dr. Boyana, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Invisible Not Broken. If you haven't already, please take the next 30 seconds to do these three things. Hit that subscribe button, tap the pretty stars to give us a rating, and share with one spoony friend. If you're interested, we have made a newsletter for chronic illness inspiration on a weekly basis. Sign up for the WellSpo, that's hashtag WellSpo for wellness inspiration, weekly newsletter that we'll be sending out each Friday afternoon. It will include recent top tier research, spoony humor memes, and stories from the community, plus any relevant announcements. You can sign up for the newsletter on wellacopia.com if you scroll to the bottom of our homepage or on blog.wellacopia.com/newsletter. Both links will be in the show notes. Lastly, Monica and I would like to do an Ask Us Anything episode to wrap up the new year. If you want to submit a question or even come on the show to ask your question in real time, send us an email, invisiblenotbroken@gmail.com. Until next time, guys, be kind, be gentle, be badass.